Hello, everyone. Survivor Specialists John and McKenna are back, and we are talking episode 12 of Survivor 46, but rewinding it and talking about it in past moments of Survivor. We got some good ones today, so it was difficult. Survivor 46, you're putting up a bit of a struggle for us to talk about past moments because these episodes have been pretty good and kind of hard to narrow down into certain topics, but we've got something.
We do have something. Honestly, this is no shade at the cast of 46. They are delivering on all cylinders. This season has been phenomenal, in my opinion.
Just making
we got bogged down a little bit with Banu for 2 episodes there in the pre-merge, but since then, it's been absolute fire. The fact that we have now had 5 different people voted out with hidden immunity idols is absurd. Honestly, last week when we got 4, I didn't think it could happen again. Yet here we are. It's happened again, but we can't keep talking about immunity idols being voted out. So
we talked about that with Jem, and we that we wasted it there, but how are we supposed to know that 4 consecutive ones would then be played later on this season?
Yeah, it caught us off guard, that's for sure. Didn't expect it. But alas, McKenna, how are you feeling about this latest episode of 46?
I am feeling good. I have a lot of people going into this finale that I could win a draft for, whether that be the specialist fantasy team, whether that be our draft, John, and whether that be a different draft that I'm in for monies. So I'm feeling good about this finale.
I like this final 5. I think there's a lot of great characters. I'm really disappointed we don't get Q in the final 5. Just like I was really disappointed when Venus went home last week. I think those 2 are some of the best characters we've had, not just in the new era, but in Survivor in a very long time. And to not have either of them playing in the finale feels like something was stolen from us. It's a good thing Jeff Probst already announced a returnee season where I'm sure at least one of them is very locked in to be playing that. But it's interesting because we kind of have this buildup of this arms race between Charlie and Maria at this point. And I don't know which one of them comes out on top.
Me either.
And I'm excited. I'm a little concerned that one of them goes at 5 in the finale and then it's like, okay, we're just watching this other person win. But the jury seems a little sour.
It could all change at fire making. It could all change at fire.
That too. Right? There's so many different variables to take into account here. I think I'd be shocked with a Ben win. I'd be shocked with a Liz win. But I don't think I would completely complain. I think the other 3 are a little further ahead in edit going towards the finale here of who I could see winning.
But who knows, that could pick up toward in the finale where Dean was kind of a little dormant, and then all of a sudden people were thinking, oh, Dean could win this thing because of the finale. So
I mean, it's a 2-hour episode. Any one of these 5 contestants could have 20 confessionals and just all of a sudden it's like, oh, this person's winning. I kind of saw where this was coming because I don't think we're at a point where I think Ben probably has the least edit to show it, but Phil's been going on about it week after week. Ben has a confessional in every episode. That's kind of weird. So I don't know. Maybe Ben pulls it off. Maybe, Charlie manages to defeat Maria at immunity and get Maria out here early. Maybe Maria and Charlie both go there, split the vote, and I don't know, Liz pulls it off. I don't know. There are so many different permutations that could happen in this finale. I'm excited for it. Yeah. But let's dive a little deeper into this penultimate episode here.
All right. So our outwit moment this week is telling people about your idol/advantage. And I feel like a lot of people want to do this to curry favor or to maybe help them along. So Q telling Maria, maybe Maria has more of a social impact on the game and could tell Q hey, you're going to need to use it. So we see Q reveal this, but then Venus the episode before saying, I'm telling no one.
Yeah, and of course, like Venus kind of had that like, oh, I have something up my sleeve, which is probably not a smart thing to do. But when with Q telling Maria about this, it feels very different than that. This feels like Q being like, because when Q says, I'm going to play this for you if you don't win immunity, I 100% believe him there. I'm pretty sure he is at that point where he is all in with this pairing with Maria. I think it's what takes him to the end if he does it. And I think saying that to her really guarantees she's locking in with him. It's so weird because when we talk about advantages, there's especially in the new era where advantages have been so public, right? Obviously, we've had like the beware advantages in the first few seasons where they had to use the goofy phrases to get them activated. We've seen even going back to like Winners at War where they had to split the idol up with someone and inherently tell them about it in order to get it to its full power. Yep. These are these little things in Survivor that we've seen so many times. But if we go to, I'm just going to jump over to Australian Survivor, which we do like not talking about that much on this podcast. But in Blood versus Water of Australian Survivor, Sandra tells literally everyone, don't tell anyone about your advantage. It's one of the biggest pieces of advice she gives to everyone on that season. Mm-hmm. And it just hasn't carried over to the new era at all. And we see Venus almost do that. But then, you know, she has had that little smirk last episode. Q doing this does feel more strategic. And there are sometimes a lot of advantages to telling someone about your advantage or idol or whatever it is. However, there are a lot of times where it backfires and it blows up in your face.
Yeah, like your moment, John.
Yeah. We just go back to heroes, healers, and hustlers, right? There is a moment, and like this is slightly different because Lauren Rimmer has like the shell idol, which is one of the weirdest idols we've ever seen in Survivor, where it comes in two parts and she has to literally pick up what's seemingly a random shell in the middle of an immunity challenge in order to get it as part of it. And she gives it to Sex Dr. Mike. And as like this show of trust. And at Tribal Council, Mike's like, apparently this is an immunity idol, so I'm just going to throw it in the fire.
Yeah, he's like, I've always wanted to do this. Goodbye. And like, you can't have this idol. And Lauren's just like, oh. Like, I wanted to trust you. Like, this was a sign of something good in the future that we could have. And it's kind of like Q here being like, oh yeah, Maria, I have an idol. We can use this. I might play it on you if you're in need of it. And she's like, okay, and thinks about it and like is not blowing up his game for having this idol.
Yeah, it's one of those instances where, again, this is the trust you have to give to people when it comes to advantages in Survivor, and why always like telling someone about one is so dangerous because you don't know what they're going to do. And I mean, especially like handing over your advantage to someone, also risky as all else. If it doesn't have a clause that says they can't do anything with this, like a la the extra vote in Game Changers. But it's a show of trust. And this was happening at a point of the game where, you know, Lauren kind of needs to do this. She needs to get to a point where she can control the game a little bit. Like HHH gets really messy when we get this far into it. So
yeah, for sure.
Having an idol here, very important. Gaining allies, very important, especially when Ben is just like pulling off idol after idol. Also, there are a lot of idols in HHH. So it's one of those things where you can utilize this advantage to your social advantage to gain allies, but you have to inherently trust them because information is so powerful in Survivor that if you can't trust them completely, they can just take it and turn it against you, like your example, McKenna.
Yeah, so one of my favorite examples of telling people about an idol or advantage comes from game changers, and that's the legacy advantage with Sierra Dawn Thomas and Sarah Lucina. And I love this moment because Sarah plays it so expertly because this is an advantage that can be willed. So she
Mhm.
makes it seem like Sierra tells her about this in confidence, being like, yes, let's be allies. And, if I happen to be voted out, I'll give it to you. And Sarah's like, light bulb. And comes up with a plan to get rid of Sierra, but act like she wasn't involved with it when she was. And then now she has this legacy advantage that she tells no one about.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most interesting aspects of telling someone about an advantage and it completely blowing up in your face because Sierra and Sarah were very close at this point in the game. They
Mhm.
were working very tightly together, and I think Sierra full-heartedly trusted Sarah at this point. This was
Yeah.
a, "Hey, I have this." Like, I think Sierra really slips up by saying, "If I'm ever voted out of the game, I'm giving this to you."
Yeah.
Like, that's the part of the advantage that she shouldn't have told.
Right.
Uh, or even, like, the fact that you could will it to someone in general, right? If you
Or
just
just
say
say like, oh, it'll go to like one of you, Brad, Ty, whoever
Mhm.
was in the alliance where Sarah doesn't have a concrete, like, you're getting this.
Yeah, or, like, even just saying something like, "I can only use it at final 6," at that point, right?
Mhm.
Like, those are the little things that could have been handled better with sharing this information, but at the
Yep.
same point, I think Sierra views it as a way of solidifying her trust with Sarah and
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, you know what? I have this. It'll benefit us when we get to this point in the game."
Mhm. And
Technically, it did. It just only benefited one of them.
and then Sarah pulls off her acting chops and is shocked at the vote, that it was Sierra going home, and then Sierra wills the legacy advantage to Sarah, and I think it's just one of the beautiful moves that Sarah makes during that season that gets her the win.
Yeah, it's obviously one of the most impressive things she can do there. And that was Sarah even votes Sierra in that episode, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So she's in the background pulling the strings on this blind side, and no one understands the depths of which she's doing for this, which is
Mhm.
why, like, I was almost shocked in this episode of 46 we didn't have Maria saying that. It really, when we don't see Maria talking about maybe we should vote out Q, he has the idol, this is dangerous, it really tells me how locked in those two were
Mhm.
because there's no reason like there's no reason Maria should be like, oh, Q is going to have an idol at final 5 and secure himself final 4.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's literally no reason to keep that in there. Yes, Q said, "Oh, well, I'll play this on you."
Mhm.
But in doing so, like that's a lot of trust Maria is showing Q in that moment that he would uphold that deal come final 5 if Maria didn't win immunity. But I guess at the same time, like you vote out Charlie here, the chances are Maria or Q wins immunity at final 5. But it's risky. And that's the moment where it was really clear to me that Maria had absolutely no idea Q was going home this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the beginning of next episode will obviously tell us because Maria
Mhm.
was informed on the Q plan, so whether she let the idol go or not, because now she knows it's back in the jungle and can find it maybe
Potentially,
for
yeah.
herself. We'll see what happens, but I feel like both of these are really interesting kind of backfires on sharing your advantage.
Yeah, and there is a potential that Maria did in fact just say, "Okay, whatever, Q's gone. Like, that's
Mhm.
fine." Or maybe she's like, "Okay, if this plan works, Charlie goes. If not, the idol's gone."
Yep.
Um, I don't know if this idol gets re-hidden at Final 5.
I feel like
Generally,
Survivor would rehide it.
well, but with New Era, they go to the new beach at Final Five.
But they didn't say that at the end of this episode.
Oh, you're right. They didn't mention that. That's very interesting because, like, typically in this new era, they've gone to the new beach, and there has been an advantage on the new
Mhm.
beach, but it's not now. It hasn't been an idol, correct?
Correct. It's always like the little like you get like a word scramble and have to do the
Yeah,
thing.
everyone has to do
Last
things to get
week
it.
was
So
last season was the counting.
yeah, you're right. They didn't mention that at final. Jeff didn't mention that at final tribal or at the last tribal council. So I
Mhm.
wonder if they're not doing that this season. That would be interesting. I don't
They
know.
might not.
Good observation.
Thank you. All right, so now we're moving into our outplay moment, which is the loved ones letters. That was the one of the parts of the reward here at the reward challenge because we got two. We got a reward and immunity, which is always fun. But it was announced after the fact, which is really annoying. I wish I would know what I'm winning. If Jeff is like, I'm gonna save everything for the end. Okay, like save what food you're eating for last as well. Like I want to know everything last or everything up front because this is a challenge I don't want to win.
It's very interesting because I mean we've talked about the advantages, disadvantages of winning rewards on Survivor several times in this podcast, and the decision to lose their loved ones challenge is huge. It can be very detrimental to your game to win this challenge uh, because people take it really personally.
Mhm.
And we see in this episode, Maria is like really brought down. Doesn't help that just like egging her on afterwards and like taking shots at her, being like, "Oh, Maria, you like birthed these children," and like it just has like this different feeling to it.
Well,
This type of relationship. It's like, come on, Jeff, you don't need to like pour salt in the wound here.
this
But
is it's also really interesting because she has a confessional saying her and Charlie said we will not be taking each other on rewards, so she knew it was coming once Charlie won it.
which it probably explains why she's breaking down at that point too, right? Because she knows
Mhm.
that she's not going at that point. But the interesting thing about the way that this is revealed is because we had Heidi on the predictions of power rankings this week, and she mentioned it over and over again. It's like the next reward is going to be loved one letters. It has to be because they always have loved one letters. Always.
Mhm.
It has been a staple of the new era. Heck, it was a staple prior to the new era where, yes, we had loved ones visits, but we usually had the letters as well accompany them. When we get to
Yep.
the point where the last trip to the sanctuary didn't have loved one letters, the pizza reward didn't have loved one letters, you kind of have to at this point assume there are loved one
Mhm.
letters involved.
Yeah,
So
and loved ones visit usually happens around 6, 5,
yeah.
this area.
Mhm.
So my my moment, I'm gonna go with the Worlds Apart auction where I obviously this is the part that broke the game that Mike didn't want to get his loved one letters, but I want to focus on Carolyn, Mama C here, and her reaction to Mike, where when he turns back and doesn't want his letter, she's ready to give up her letter and ready to be in the game. Where Heidi, where Maria did the same thing of, okay, I don't get these letters. I'm in game mode. They're both very focused. Like, I'll have my family when I get out of here. I don't need it right now. I want to be in the game.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and this is one of the fascinating things about loved ones on Survivor in general, and how much they can motivate you. Some people need that affirmation from them that we see Charlie get in his loved one letter, where he's like, "Oh, right, I told him that I was going to game hard, so I have to make the decision to cut Maria here." Or we see Maria in the opposite, where she's been withheld her love and has that opportunity to uh, kind of use it to galvanize herself and make herself
Mhm.
stronger for the next immunity challenge. And we see Carolyn in this moment putting the game and winning the game ahead of like the simple pleasure of reading loved ones. And of course, it's very different when we're talking about a 39-day season versus a 26-day season. Probably around the same day, in all honesty. I'd have to double check what day that happened in Worlds Apart, but this is it's a moment where I think a lot of really good Survivor players can look at a moment like this and be like, what's more important for my family? Me reading their letter on television and like crying about it for a little bit, or me winning $1 million? And that's what was so interesting about that entire Worlds Apart situation, where, and again, now that I'm thinking about it, I think the option actually broke because they decided to put the advantage after the loved one letters instead of before the loved one letters, where almost every other auction preceding it, the loved one letters were the last thing in the auction.
True. So like Mama C was waiting and holding out for the advantage, and they all were. Like Mike was doing it, Dan was doing it. They were all wanting this advantage. But then they decided, let's all be humans and get our loved one letters. And when Mike goes back on it, Carolyn is like, well, then I don't care. My deal's off. Like, I'm not just going to hand over this $20 to him. No, I don't want this. Give it back. And I want my shot at that advantage.
Yeah, it's a game move for sure. It's really respectable what Carolyn's doing here, and because when we look at Worlds Apart, right, like Mike, this is the point where Mike turns the entire remaining castaways against himself. And this is where we get into that Mike has to find immunity idols and win challenges in order to get to the end and win this game. However, there were other people there willing to play. And Mike didn't have to make this move. But Carolyn, in saying, I'm giving this up too, that's kind of the denouncement that makes it so that Mike gets put into this, onto his back foot here, and has to play from behind for the rest of the game.
And yeah, where he's like, no, never mind, I'll take it. And doesn't do like the shady thing, because he won't get that surefire like shot at the advantage, because Mama C is going to give up her letter too. So then, John, your moment is like a little different.
It is. I mean, there are different moments that we can talk about with loved one letters and what they did with Charlie, right? Like the affirmation you need in order to win the game. Something like Jeffra in Cagayan gets the letter from home being like, no, I can turn on my allies because like this is a sign that I should do so. But we have so many loved one letters throughout Survivor history. There is one batch of letters that's always really stuck out to me, and that's Edge of Extinction. And it's the letters they receive on Edge of Extinction that they wrote themselves before the game started. It's such a different take on letters in Survivor. And honestly, me personally, sure, letters from my loved ones would be fantastic. I'd love to be on the island and receive a letter from you, McKenna. However, me pumping myself up and being like talking about all the aspirations for the game while I've already been voted out of the game and I have to fight my way back into it, like Chris Underwood, probably be more motivated, because I have learned in recent months I can motivate myself quite well.
I don't know. I feel like I would like to read stuff from my loved ones, because this letter from myself is like one thing. Like sometimes with letters from home, you get it from multiple different people. It's also more like, I feel like it would be more stimulating for me to read a bunch of things, and like it's not coming from me, it's coming from someone else. So I feel like I'd still want the loved one letters opposed to a letter from myself, because like I don't know. I don't motivate myself well. I need other people there to help motivate me to do something. So having someone else encourage me could help, rather than myself being like, you can do it, you can get off that rock. And I'm like, Yeah, but this rock is comfy. I'll do that later. Thanks. Past me. Like
I think one of the interesting things about the way these letters work is I think they only really work in an edge of extinction situation, because
Mhm.
I think letters from home in this situation completely demoralizing. At least to me. Maybe
Mhm.
others disagree with that. Maybe others would feel very um, motivated by receiving letters from home in that case. I would just think about how much of a disappointment I was to all of my loved ones that I'm sitting here on an island that I've been voted out of the game, and or like voted out of the one phase of the game, and like I'm in this like game limbo here where I'm suffering in order to try and get back into the game so I can win the $1 million. It's I think just reading that letter from yourself really can be more motivating in that situation than the loved one letter. And obviously, it's really hard to compare because we haven't had anything that has been similar to it in Survivor.
Mhm.
In fact, in Winners at War, we got everyone's families there on Edge of Extinction instead, right?
Yeah.
Very, very different. I also think seeing your family in person is very different than reading a letter from them and being disappointed, right? Because that way they can adjust to the situation and give you the affirmation you need to motivate you on the island. Whereas in Edge of Extinction, having this letter from yourself of the high hopes you had, and just realizing, I think, how much more you can do, right? And like sometimes I think a lot of people come into the game of Survivor very optimistic about their chances. Obviously, I don't think there's a single person. It's weird. If we look at 46, we look at Jeff at the beginning of the premiere says one of you can't win the game. I don't think there is anyone going on to Survivor thinking they are that person.
Mhm.
So when you're writing a letter to yourself in before right before you start playing the game, I think you're talking with optimism and things like that. And then really the letter is more of this psychological amping yourself up for the game you're about to embark in. And I don't think everyone's going to be like, man, you're reading this letter. You must have sucked at the game. So it's just this interesting take on a letter in Survivor.
Yeah.
It doesn't hold the emotional weight of loved ones' letters. We've seen it, right? And I don't think we, as people who have not been on that island, isolated from everyone we know in our lives, could ever understand the importance of getting a loved one's letter. But seeing Chris be motivated by his own letter to himself, it really it reminds me of exactly what Charlie in 46 reminded me of that moment where it's just like, oh yeah, this is what I need to do. I have to play the game. I have
Mhm.
to go hard. And again, like Maria in the opposite situation of I didn't get these letters. I need to win. I need to play the game. It's just fascinating to see the motivations that simple pieces of paper with some words on them can be for people in the game of Survivor.
Yeah. I I agree. I agree. I don't think it's a competition. I feel like it's just what your
Yeah,
preference
I
is.
agree.
Um and different motivations. So like my motivation would definitely be helped and backed by other people versus whatever the heck I said to a questionnaire before the
For
game
sure. Yeah,
started.
totally fair.
Because I wouldn't have been phrasing it as like things to help me for the rest of the game, right? I would be just like filling it out.
Sure.
I wouldn't like think, "Oh, if I get voted to Edge of Extinction," obviously they didn't know Edge of Extinction, but if I get voted out, I get to read this or whatever, something to like boost me. I wouldn't be thinking in that mindset.
I think my letter would literally start, "Hey, John, how's it feel being a millionaire?" But
And then
that's
you're
just me. That's just me. So
all right. So our outlast moment this week came to us in a struggle. We were pitching a bunch of different things, but then we decided on voting out the polarizing player who is probably going to just take up a spot at Final Tribal Council. So voting out Q here, who is the one of the biggest polarizing players, whether you love him, whether you hate him. Um, he was most likely going to be sitting at Final Tribal Council. Could he win? Who knows? But he is one of those polarizing players that probably had a shot at Final Tribal Council and was taken out.
It's such a fascinating thing looking at Q in this game because it's very clear Maria wanted to drag him to Final Tribal Council, feeling like she was a shoo-in to beat him. And I think a lot of people had that opinion because you could just tell by how much people dislike Q, right? Obviously, Q had he did that whole quitting thing, which probably lost a lot of respect of a lot of the players out there. He's antagonizing people the entire season. He did that whole thing where he refused to let someone give up their reward for Liz. There are all these little things that make it so that it seems like Q can't win the game at this point. But you get to the final tribal council, you can pitch your case to the jury. You might be able to win the game. That's what it comes down to. And I think Q, last week we saw Kenzie and Venus both saying Q has a chance of winning this game if he gets to the end, right? And I think us as an audience have a very different perspective of Q's win equity than the people on the island do. And I think we see that a lot in Survivor. But what made this so difficult to pinpoint moments that reflect it to is I think Q has such a higher win equity than most other polarizing players who go in this type of position because they're just taking a spot at Final Tribal Council. He's not the quote-unquote GOAT that a lot of people take to the end of the game in order to get an easy win. He is much more someone who, you probably beat him, but there's still that slight chance he pulls off some miracle and wins the game.
Yeah, it's a definite possibility. So we are going to get into who our polarizing players are, and I'll start with mine. It is Courtney Merritt from Panama, and that is the episode we were watching over on the Patreon. I'm a big Panama fan, so we finally get to talk the 3-2-1 vote. And that is Panama season 12, episode 12, Perilous Scramble. So that was uploaded just a few minutes ago, right before this podcast went live. So go check it out after you finish up here. But Courtney Merritt, she is, I think, the next polarizing after Shane. This is the her vote out, which was right after Touchy Subjects, where she's the biggest poser, kind of gets crapped on by all of her castaways. And she is just kind of, everyone is wanting to take her to the final 3 and then 2.
Yeah, because remember, that's before Final 3s even existed. But it's so interesting because obviously, we can commend Suri for her analyzing and the realization that she has that Courtney is taking up a spot at the end that someone else can have. And it's really that big shift in mentality with that when it comes to Survivor in general. And we've kind of moved away from that shifting and thinking because we've moved into this very, I have to take out my closest ally era that this new era seems to be proposing now. Courtney was a shoo-in for the end of that game in Panama. Yep. I think the only person who really didn't want her there was Suri because she correctly realized she was in everyone's endgame plans. So the difference between Courtney and Q, Courtney loses Final Tribal Council to literally anyone.
Yep.
That she sits next to. Q has that potential with the right combination of people to pull off the win. But this is really that point where Survivor changes to realizing, and yes, we've had a lot of people previous to this talking about, I want to be up against the best competitors at the end and stuff like that, right? Obviously going back to Colby in season 2, taking Tina over Keith, right? Here's a clear win. Here's someone who will likely beat you or has a chance to beat you. And Courtney here represents that sure win. Yeah. That we see so many people elect not to take, right? Again, Cagayan, Wu decides to take Tony instead of Cass, who he thinks he has a clear win. Unfortunately, Wu's actually the Courtney in the situation, but that's fine. It's so fascinating because in 46, we don't get to that point. We don't get to the point where someone's saying Q is taking the spot at Final Tribal Council. But it's almost like it's being said without being said.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, this is the whole point of Charlie realizing, yes, Q's incredibly tight with Maria. He's in her pocket. He will do whatever she wants, which is also means he's taking up a spot at Final 3. It's very clear Maria wants him at Final 3. And luckily, there are enough people pissed off with Q at this point that they're just like, yes, we get to vote out Q. Let's do it. We've said we are doing it for like 4 straight votes now, and we haven't done it yet. So it's fascinating when we compare them, because obviously this vote in 46 is nowhere near as impressive as the vote in Panama with the 3-2-1 and on a strategic level and everything. But at its core, it's still about taking out this person who is causing a bit of drama at camp and taking up a spot at the end of the game.
Yeah, exactly. John, you also have a very polarizing character.
I do. We're going to go to the Philippines here, and it's not quite the same situation. I think it's closer to 46 than it is to Panama with Abby Maria, and we're at the final 5, and wait, is it final? Yeah, it's final 5.
Yeah, Abby's 5th.
Yeah, Abby's 5th. We're at the final 5, and Lisa and Scoopin have this decision of, like, do they take out Abby here, or do they take out Denise? And maybe in hindsight they should have taken out Denise. That's their own problem. But in the end, what we're dealing with is Abby has been so grating to these people this entire season. Everyone is fed up with Abby Maria at this point. And because of that, we get this conversation between Lisa and Scoopin where they're talking about the fact that Abby is someone who really benefits us being at the end of the game. She's there. Nobody's voting for her. So that means the votes should come on us instead. So you have to make this decision. And ultimately they do elect, or Lisa kind of elects that she's closer with Denise and wants to keep Denise in the game. So votes out Abby instead. But this is a situation where you have to be viewing this as they're good for me to get to the end, but with them here, do I get to the end?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what Q was in 46.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Abby was this person who everyone despised and who was playing a lot of the woe is me, and it wasn't working in her favor. Like, I feel like her and Venus actually probably have a little bit more similarities. But she has this, like, just personality that's when Q's like, I want to quit, everything blew up. When Abby says something, it blows up. So, like, they both have that, like, very polarizing twist about them. And I am surprised that Abby did not get further in this game and is sitting at Final Tribal Council, and it's all Tandang.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things where, again, like, this decision to take out Abby here is really pivotal to getting to the end. Obviously, Denise wins this season, and she can only do that if she's still sitting at the end of the game. But it's just so fascinating getting rid of Abby here, because at this point, the difference between Panama and Philippines is so far into the final 3 of it all that you're getting to the end. So you kind of have a little bit of a buffer zone having that extra person there.
Yeah, and also,
however, when, like, you see, like, Malcolm winning all these challenges and everything, the concern is then, can we convince Malcolm to vote up Denise at Final 4? If you're assuming Malcolm's winning in a Terry-like situation, right?
Right.
So I just don't know. Like, is it better to take this polarizing person further in the game in a Final 3 situation than a Final 2 situation?
I don't know. I don't
What?
know. Well, that was everything that we have. John, do you know what's going on in the specialist universe? All I know is that the Amazing Race is on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, it's finale week. We are finally at finale week. It feels like the season's gone by so fast. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Probably should have said that earlier. Don't tell Phil I didn't.
Yeah, well,
But it's finale week. Phil's back, so we have some fun stuff lined up. We are going to have a prediction and power rankings with a very special guest that I don't know who it is yet, but I know there's someone on Monday, I believe. The cinema specialists are coming back on Monday. You said the Amazing Races on Monday. There's a lot of stuff on Monday. I'm assuming Phil and Will are talking about the finale of Deal or No Deal Island at some point this week. And then, yeah, there's a finale on Wednesday. You bet Phil and Will will be there recapping it afterwards. And McKenna and I will be back again on Friday next week to break down that finale and how it relates to some other Survivor finale. We don't know which one yet. We'll have to find out next week. But make sure you tune in to do so.
Yes. Alrighty. Well, we will see you next week right here with the Rewind. Goodbye, everyone.